My, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Hello and welcome to episode 55 of PvA Radio. I am your host, Luke Croft. Joining me, as always, freelance gaming journalist Cody Mellowkline. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fine. How about you?
I'm doing well, and I'm not upset that you're doing fine. Just for the record, if you're watching over here on Twitch, when I said fuck after he said he was doing well, it was because our audio was jacked up, but we are good to go now. Also joining us, he is in the pumpkin spice mood, ladies and gentlemen, Larry Hunt.
Every day is fall in my mind.
So you tried it. Let's just get the review out of the way at the top here. All right.
Yeah,
you went to the Starbucks
right.
yesterday, first day of pumpkin spice latte season. What'd you get and how was it?
My wife got the classic pumpkin spice latte. Excellent as always, except for 2 years ago. The recipe that year was a little spotty, but this year, fantastic. Loved it. Stared into the sunset as I fell into pumpkin and fall leaves mentally because they're not here yet.
Stared into the 95-degree sunset.
Hunt 2020, abolish the sun.
The sun he so wishes was non-existent.
yes. And we also tried the pumpkin cream cold brew, which also good, but it's a lot more subdued as far as the pumpkin taste goes. So it's not my favorite. Going to stick with PSL this year.
I'm a big fan of all things iced, but I did see where you were angling for that CNN feature again with your with your photo, but this time it was your family, so it's much less interesting.
Yeah, but hey, CNN, if you need an interview, I'll make it interesting.
This is PvA Radio. We get together each and every week over here at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesdays on twitch.tv/PvA Radio. More on that here in just a second. Each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week to the table. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article, or your CAFA, if you will. And Larry, what do we want people to do with that?
You're going to find your neighbor's computer password. You're going to log on. You're going to change their background image to CAFA, and you're also going to spam it in the chat. I almost said spam it in the emote.
Spam it in the emote, baby.
Spam that chat in the emote.
If you can't catch us live for these shenanigans like Roy Speedrun is doing over here, you can find us on youtube.com the very next day or on podcast services everywhere, wherever you're listening to us. We greatly appreciate it. Roy Speedrun astutely points out back on Twitch. Astutely. Very observant of Roy Speedrun there. We tried to sneak it past you because if we're being honest with you, we loved Mixer.
We did.
I did. We really loved Mixer for a multitude of reasons that I believe we spoke about a little bit last week. But the main reason we're back on Twitch for the time being is because Mixer is missing a very, very, very crucial feature that makes my job just a hell of a lot easier, and that is the direct export to YouTube. So on Twitch, I can highlight everything, break it out topic by topic, and send it over without having to download anything onto my hard drive and manually edit it. Mixer does not have that feature, and I was, as you can see, our videos last week were sparse because I would get through the middle of an upload, and then either YouTube would shit the bed on me, my internet would shit the bed on me, my laptop would shit the bed on me. Twitch kind of takes out that middleman and allows us just to do it all from here and not have to worry about it. So, but I told Cody before, as soon as Mixer gets an export to YouTube, we're back over there, baby. But we will do with Twitch what they do with all of their people, use them, and then get rid of them as soon as they don't, advantage them any longer. So, yeah, we're going to take advantage of this platform and their features. So that's why we're back on Twitch. All right. What?
I was... Never mind.
While we were away, Twitch did stream porn on our channel. I'm just kidding.
Probably. Who knows?
Who knows?
And that's why one day we're going to make like my dad and leave.
Oh my gosh. All right, guys. before we dig this all any deeper, let's jump into the show and get it started, because we have a lot to cover here before we ever even get to the topics. With what have you been playing? Codsworth Coddington, let's begin with you. What have you been playing this week?
I dove back into No Man's Sky after they released that major update. And it's actually fun.
Nice.
It's like, actually, I think it's a lot more in line with, I think, what a lot of people expected it to be at launch, but they've just, a couple things. They've eliminated the grind to a certain extent. You can now mine more resources quickly. There's not as much inventory management because you can hold more of each element within a single item slot, so you're not having to constantly shuffle things around as much. That's still an element of it.
Yeah, didn't they increase the inventory size like 25 times or something like that?
I believe so. Yeah, it's pretty. I haven't even run into an issue with it. It's so sizable. And they've just. I had dipped back in when they did No Man's Sky Next. I think was the expansion before this. And they've just sort of. They've done a really good job of creating achievable milestones to the point where I played for what I thought was an hour and it turned into 2 hours, turned into two and a half hours. I just kept on hitting that next either narrative beat that seemed a little bit intriguing, or realizing I just needed this much more to craft this. The gameplay loop is a lot more defined and a lot more addicting at this point. And they've just sort of implemented a bunch of small stuff. And I just reached the social hub and I actually ran into my first other player, said hi to them, then immediately ditched them because I had things to do. But it's a fun game now. And I would definitely, it's one of those games where one aspect of it that I always liked was kind of the Zen-like element of it, where I never felt too stressed. Obviously, there are things like your hazard, like the hazard warnings on your suit, and elemental hazards that you have to keep track of, but I never felt too much of an alarm bell going off in my mind. And I just liked exploring the planets and discovering things. That's still an element of it, and that's still something that'll keep me going back to it, just to like, if when I wake up in the morning I don't want to play anything too intense, I'll do that. And the essential thing that it does the best, the best games, even if they have a lot of flaws to them, like No Man's Sky, have that one thing that is defining and that I'll always remember. And the experience of getting in your spaceship, initiating the thrusters, and taking off through the atmosphere into space is still one of the most memorable things I've ever experienced in a game. Every time I do it, it still has that. It still feels really good, and it still just has that sense of awe that I think we all thought No Man's Sky would have. So I had a great time dipping back into that for the time I spent with it. I probably spent about 5 to 6 hours overall, so not a sizable amount of time, but I built a base. I visited a bunch of planets. I discovered a bunch of stuff. Having a good time with that.
Nice.
But the thing I was looking forward to last week that I mentioned, what is Control, the new Remedy game that was one of my most anticipated games of the year, and it has quickly become one of my favorite games of the year. This is one of the single weirdest big budget games I've ever played. There's a lot to say about this game, and I still haven't even unlocked like a second, I'll call them superpowers, but so I'm still only a little bit, probably 5 or 6 hours into the game. But the visual design of this game is one of the most distinct things about it. It combines brutalist architecture and takes a lot of inspiration from Stanley Kubrick, from David Lynch, both in terms of the way it looks and the way it feels. There's also a hefty dose of Mr. Robot in there in terms of how it tells its story, which I'm a huge fan of that show. But within the first hour of this game, they throw at you, I guess, spoiler alert, but these things are thrown at you pretty quickly. They throw at you the astral plane. They throw at you the fact that you have superpowers. They throw at you a trans-dimensional triangle that speaks to you in Babel that is translated. All of this stuff is thrown at you, and that's not even the weirdest stuff in this game.
Was this directed by Kojima?
Kojima's a huge fan and is apparently in the game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I haven't reached that side quest yet. But it's weird without being it's weird, but it makes me ask questions and slowly doles out the answers to those questions in a constantly intriguing way, and it has answers to them. It's not like it's just making it up on the spot. The world is just so absolutely intoxicating. I've been collecting every single document I can find, and I can't remember the last time I did that other than Bioshock. For me, this is one of the most engrossing worlds I've experienced in a game since Bioshock. The setting is just so fucking weird, and so I just want to know more about it. I want to know more about the people, and I want to know more about the world. And that's not even... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, speaking about this next to Bioshock is huge for you. You don't talk a lot about Bioshock on this show, but Cody just sleeps in a bed made of rolled up Bioshock posters.
I do. I have a big picture of Ken Levine over my bed. No, I mean the world itself is as intriguing as Rapture in different ways, but in equally intriguing ways. I just want to pour over every inch of it, and it has a little bit of that Portal aspect to it, where it's the mundanity of like office life contrasted with weird experimentation and weird kind of paranatural events. There's a lot of the X-Files in this game, and a lot of there's another thing. Kind of a little bit of Ghostbusters, but basically like the idea of it is that you're in the building of the Federal Bureau of Control, which is this U.S. organization that is set up to monitor, investigate, and I guess block out the memories of paranatural events in the U.S. and across the U.S. So it has a little bit of Men in Black to it as well, where they're like, if people encounter these events or they walk into this building,
gotta get
they'll
that
just like wipe the person's memory. Yeah, exactly. And that's not even mentioning the action, which is super fun and can be pretty challenging. It's a mix of like supernatural abilities, like you have telekinesis, you can fling objects at people, you can levitate, you can dash, like do a speed, like a mini teleportation dash, and that combines with your weapon, which is one of the more interesting weapons, although its functions are the same as anything you've seen in a game, like a shotgun or a pistol or a sniper rifle. You only have one weapon, and that weapon transforms. It's bonded to you mentally. It bonds to you at the beginning of the game, and you can have two modes active at a time, so you can switch between those two. But its base mode is a pistol, and that pistol will transform into a shotgun, a sniper rifle, or a machine gun, a submachine gun, and it'll kind of shift form and then shift back to whatever form you had before. It's really interesting, and it feels great. The action feels great, and I wish it ran as great as it felt, because this game is definitely like tugging at the capacity of the Xbox One and PlayStation. I'm playing on Xbox One, and in some of the action, that frame rate dips.
Oh man.
It hasn't been to the point where it's like detrimental to my play, but like you can pick up so many things in this game, and when you're flinging it around, pieces of paper are flying out of cabinets, bottles are hitting the ground and breaking, fire extinguishers are exploding. There's a lot of like minute detail to what you can do with the environment and break it, tear it apart, and that obviously is creating a lot of wear and tear on what these machines can do.
Well, I read a Reddit thread about how this is one of the first games that like really kind of pushes the RTX on PC with the ray tracing and that sort of stuff. And I don't understand any of that from a technical perspective, but from what I understand, graphically, this game is super impressive on the PC. So I can see why it would push the limits.
Definitely. It's gorgeous on the consoles as well, or the Xbox One, as far as I can say. The art design is a thing that's even better than just the graphics themselves. I guess graphics are only great as long as the art design is there as well, and they've definitely nailed this kind of kitschy like 60s 70s office look with brutalist architecture. It definitely has flaws. I think it sometimes teases out its mysteries too long before trying to explain something to you, and it can get pretty sci-fi jargony. Obviously, the performance issues, but all of that stuff aside, I'm in love with this game so far, and I don't even feel like I'm halfway through. It has a Metroidvania feel to it too, so you go back and kind of unlock areas as you unlock powers, which I always like. But I'm loving this game. It quickly shot to the top of my favorite games list.
Yeah, this week is like a weirdly busy week.
I know.
For games. Like we were talking about it in our Discord. It's because we have Control. Astral Chain comes out on Friday, which is Platinum Games' new game that I'm really looking forward to.
Getting rave reviews.
Yeah. Let's see.
Man from Medan.
Man of Medan.
Of Medan. And then Blair Witch comes out on Friday as well. So
I didn't even know that.
four games I'm interested in. I'll probably play Blair Witch because it's going to be on Game Pass. And then I'm going to buy Man of Medan, and I'm still torn between Control and Astral Chain. Like,
yeah.
See, I feel like Man of Medan and Blair Witch. Those have to have some pretty overlapping audiences. So I'm not thrilled that they're both releasing on the same day.
Yeah.
I want to play both, but the Man of Medan is my choice. I'm buying that game. I'll be playing it as soon as I can get my hands on it.
It sounds like it's a pretty brisk playthrough, like 5 to 6 hours, which is actually pretty good. That's like a weekend, like definitely a weekend activity. It's like binge watching a short series.
But those games also, for me, have a lot of replayability.
Yeah.
So
this one seems to have a lot of cool multiplayer stuff in it too, so I'm excited for that.
Now, does Control not pique your interest, Larry, being a fan of Alan Wake and the work that Remedy did there?
Yeah.
It really does. And one day I'll probably get around to playing it. And I'm actually more likely to get around to it sooner now that I've heard Cody rave about it. But I've just been so excited for Man of Medan for so long. Like that's where my head's at. I can only afford to get one this week. And that's the one.
All right. Well, what have you been playing, Larry?
I've been playing some more Overwatch, and it's safe to say I am just back on the Overwatch train. I am a regular Overwatch player again. Anytime you guys want to get on, let me know. I'm there. 222 has been the salvation of that game. And I think it's really cool that you have different SRs for the different roles that you play. So, I can get on when you guys aren't on and utterly tank myself in a role that I'm not that good at and not feel bad. I mean, I'll drag strangers down, no problem, but not you guys. Eventually the SR will sort itself out there. But anyway, I also jumped back into PUBG a little bit. We played some PUBG.
Yeah.
And it's playable.
Surprisingly. After
playable.
After nearly 2 years.
We only played a few matches, but at no point did I feel like I died because the game screwed me over. And before, I just felt like most of the time I died because the game screwed me over. I didn't glitch in any staircases. It was fantastic. And as far as the Battle Royale games go, it's my favorite conceptually. Just it's the most realistic of them. And I've always wished that it ran better than it did. And so it's still not my favorite all around, but I'll probably be revisiting it again soon. And then another game that I jumped back into that I hadn't touched for a while was For Honor. And I had a lot of fun with it. I got to see they continue to crank content out for that game. If you're interested in it, it's definitely worth jumping in and checking out. But what got me to play it was actually, I watched a lot of Star Wars this week and just the epic lightsaber battles. I was like, man, I just want to have a sword fight. And For Honor is the place to be if you want to have a sword fight.
All right. My list of games here is actually quite long and has some new stuff on it. I'll start with the old. I game share with a buddy of mine on PlayStation, and he bought Madden, which means I own Madden, which means I'm going to play Madden because it's Madden. It doesn't matter how good or bad it is. The more I play it, the more I'm like, okay, there are improvements here, but overall, I still wouldn't have spent any money on it. But so just that's a soul food game for me. Like I've had kind of a weird week. We didn't do the nightly rundown Monday and Tuesday because my life has been a little stressful, and I was just like, I need to reset, recharge. And so the last 2 nights I've just been staying. Well, Monday night I just went to bed. But last night I stayed up and just listened to podcasts and played Madden, which was awesome. So it's just good, kind of mindless gaming for me. Then Sunday I tried Vampire for a couple hours. Because I'm going to be trying one game from Xbox Game Pass each week. The writing in that game is bad. It's really, really bad. Like, the world is interesting. So it takes place during the 1918 flu pandemic, which is intriguing to me because when I was in high school, I took a research class where we had to read a book about the 1918 flu pandemic, and like basically the entire year-long class was structured around this book. So like I have a weird amount of dumb knowledge about this flu pandemic, and so that being the backdrop of this game was interesting to me. But the dialogue is just very, very bad. The guy, the main character, talks out loud to himself a lot, and I'm not really a big fan of that. There's all these dialogue choices that you make in conversations, but it doesn't seem like there's any real weight to the decisions that you're making. So like, I'm in a bar in one of the missions and I'm interrogating a woman, and she's like, I can't tell you the truth about this man, it'll put me in danger. And I was basically just like, please? And she goes, okay. And just like spills, like pours her soul out and bears all of her secrets to me. And so while the world is interesting, I think the dialogue is going to be a hang up for me to try to get into any more of that. The combat seemed really fun though. The skill tree and the ways that you can the abilities that you can unlock throughout the game, that all seemed really cool, but the dialogue's just bad. Then I got a chance to play the Call of Duty 2v2 alpha over the weekend.
You were really pumped about this.
Guys, it's fucking awesome. I was a huge Call of Duty guy back in the day, like Modern Warfare days. I had a team of guys that I would play with basically every single night. And Modern Warfare 2 were just like a really big part of my life. But the game started to get away from me when it got more and more twitchy, more and more fast-paced. They started adding in all these abilities. And in every promise of them going back to boots to the ground, I don't feel like they've really nailed that in any kind of way. Especially like I was really excited about Call of Duty World War II, but I don't feel like they really nailed that at all. The combat in this game feels awesome. Like there is a weight to it. There is, it feels a lot more like Rainbow Six Siege combat wise than it does Call of Duty. Like, so the 2v2 mode is called Gunfight. You load into this very, very small map, and you're given a random loadout, and everybody on the map has that same loadout. And so you fight to the first to win 6 rounds. So the games only last about, like, I'd say 7-8 minutes tops. They're really, really fast paced because you only get 1 life per round. And every 2 rounds, your loadout changes. So you may have one round where like everybody just has a sniper rifle. And then the next round, everybody's got a rocket launcher and a handgun and stuff like that. So really unique in that sense, but it's super tactical in that you get headshot one time and you're down. Like it feels almost like one of the modes I got really into when I was at like the height of my Call of Duty playing days was the hardcore modes, like hardcore team deathmatch, those sorts of things. That's the kind of gameplay that this 2v2 mode has. So I can only imagine how fun it's going to be when I'm playing with people that I know and like can communicate, because I just went in and muted everybody that I was playing with and against. There's also like pre-game lobby shit talk in it, so you can hear the team you're playing against, which is pretty dope. So, yeah, I'm super, super excited about it. The gunplay feels good. The combat style feels great. And just the mode is interesting. I think Call of Duty is at its best when it's trying to innovate in the multiplayer space and not just be like, we're going to throw a battle royale in because battle royales are really popular right now. And this feels like an innovation for them.
Do you know if they're gonna have? I assume they will because I think it's kind of a staple of Call of Duty. Will they have private games? You can like do private matches with friends.
I'm sure they will, and that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, to do like a 2v2, like a gunfight tournament.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a lot of fun. All right, guys. Well, let's talk about one other game. Let's talk about Gears Pop. All right. So I downloaded this game because I like Gears, and I like Pops. I've got some Pop figures back here. Moira's big fat head won't allow her to stand up. She constantly falls down. So I downloaded Gears Pop. Fuck mobile games. That's all I'm going to say, man. Like, mobile games suck. And this mobile game is no different in the way that it sucks. All this shit that they talk about with Gears, with like Gears 5 having this awesome, like, consumer friendly microtransaction model, blah, 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 blah. They didn't apply any of that to to this. And I'm not going to get too like in the weeds with it because I called Larry last night and I was like, Larry plays a lot more mobile games than I do. And I was like, let me know if this is normal or if this is unique. And I kind of described a lot of the things that Gears Pop does, and it's apparently normal how most of these games do this.
Yeah, if you've played a free-to-play mobile game, it's the same standard stuff.
But I want to say this. I didn't want to make this my topic because I'm just sick of us talking about this constantly. But I just want to say this, having personally experienced it. Given the fact that we have companies on record talking about the whales that are required to make these games financially viable, given that we know that is their target demographic of being able to get these like high rollers hooked to these games, how can any makers of these games sleep at night knowing the way that they're trying to take advantage of people through the mechanics of these games? It's just, it's fucking gross. Like, you come in and it's like, hey, here's a reward. Log in every day for the next 7 days and you'll get a reward each time you log in. Oh, hey, you only have these 4 loot box slots that you fill as you're playing the game. You can continue to play the game, but you're not going to really earn anything for playing, and you have to wait 4 hours for it to unlock, or you can pay for this currency that'll unlock it itself. Like, it instantly, you can see the way that it tries to establish habits for its players to get them to engage in the game and to spend money in it. And then you can see in the matchmaking as well how if you're not spending money on the game, it disadvantages you because you earn SR faster than you earn like level ups for your coins in order to be able to keep up with the player. So if you're not spending money, you're going to get rolled as you climb in the ranks because there are people in your rank that are spending money. And it's just fucking gross, man. And I just don't understand how you can feel good about your product when that is the model that you have to rely on for it to be successful.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's most mobile games. And it's just so obviously predatory. Like you said, the building of habits right out of the gates. Yeah.
Yeah, the game itself is fun. It's a fun little strategy game. Like, you've got all these different characters with different abilities, and you have to put them on the map. And there's 2 turrets you're trying to attack, and then you have to kill the operator behind it. And so, like, there's some interesting ways to build unique team compositions and different strategies that you can employ. And it's a fun game to just pick up and be like, all right, I need to take a 3-minute break from what I'm doing and just play a game. But then you start feeling like you're getting left in the dust because I'm not willing to spend $20 to be able to unlock some loot boxes for some imaginary coins, like, so. All right. Well, let's jump into it, guys, because we are like 30 minutes into this show and we have just gotten done with what have we been playing. Larry,
we should play less games this week.
Stop playing video games so that we can talk about video games. Circle Hunter in the chat says the only good mobile game is Neko Atsume. Change my mind. I don't even know what that is.
Oh, my friend plays that.
My favorite mobile game is DoorDash.
That one took me a minute to get.
Yeah.
So, yes, you collect cats.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
He loves cats. We're polar opposites.
Cats.
Circle Hunter, you should try a game called Night of the Full Moon. It's like a card game meets a dungeon crawler. And it's a single player game, and you only pay to unlock new storylines. It's actually a lot of fun and not predatory. It's fantastic.
All right. So he says, and buy cat toys to attract more cats. All right, this game sounds like it's right up my alley. I think I'm in. All right, Larry, let us start with you. What is your topic for us today?
All right, so for my topic, I looked at a little article from Twinfinite.net. You used to write there.
My old stomping grounds.
Yeah. And I kind of want to talk about the future of Microsoft's first-party games, but they interviewed Aaron Greenberg, and within that, they talked about the fact that Microsoft had recently acquired 8 studios, and all of those studios are working on multiple projects. And in this interview, Greenberg states that there are no current plans of taking those first-party games to other platforms. And real quick, before we get into the discussion, I just wanted to quickly go through those 8 studios and what they're sort of known for. So in the last year, they've acquired Obsidian Entertainment, which you may know from Pillars of Eternity, Fallout New Vegas, In Exile Entertainment. They did the Bard's Tale 4, Mage's Tale, Ninja Theory, which you'll know for Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
And the latest game they're working on that's going to kill Overwatch, destroy it, put it into the ground, dude, for all time, forever and for all time. Bleeding Edge.
You would be right if not for the fact that I've been reminded by many people that Overwatch is a dead game. I've been told that since launch, since before launch. Playground Games, which you'll know from the Forza series. Compulsion Games, which you'll know from We Happy Few. Undead Labs, who did State of Decay and State of Decay 2. The Initiative, which is kind of a new thing, and they don't really have a history yet.
They're working on a quad A game.
Yes. But their studio head, Daryl Gallagher, was formerly the head guy at Crystal Dynamics, so you may know them from Tomb Raider. Mojang, which made Minecraft.
That's all they need to make.
Yes.
That's all they will continue to make.
Sorry, I read something strange. Oh yeah, my camera fell over. That's great. And Rare, which that's not a recent acquisition. So I'm actually getting into the older games now that I've scrolled through this list a little far. And I'm not sure I hit all 8. There were a few more picked up.
Double Fine.
Yeah, Double Fine.
Double Fine.
That was the most recent acquisition.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that gives you an idea. And for me, let's start here. This is just really exciting. Oh, let me say one more thing. In this interview, Greenberg also told us that we can expect to see games at XO this year that we haven't seen before, and that Microsoft is going to have the biggest spring lineup that they've ever had. So that's all very exciting. A few weeks ago, I put in as my topic and did not go with it that it was going to be, do I actually believe that Microsoft is going to do anything to improve their issue of lacking first-party exclusives? So how are you guys feeling about where Microsoft is sitting right now? Which of these studios are you most excited about? Do you have any wild speculation on what you think we might see at XO from some of these companies? What are you thinking about Microsoft's future with all these recent acquisitions?
I think that if they feel good, I feel good. I mean, look, the studios they've acquired are studios that a lot of them I like. I really like Ninja Theory. They also acquired the studio that makes State of Decay. I can't remember what they're called, but the State of Decay games are great. I don't have much of a history with Double Fine, but I know that they've made some beloved titles. And so I think what intrigues me the most about Xbox's first-party lineup now is the diversity of games that are being made. The Ninja Theory thing just blows my mind. Like, they just made Hellblade, which is this awesome, like, single player experience, and now they've just announced Bleeding Edge, which is this like action packed multiplayer melee combat, like kind of Overwatch-esque hero combat game. And like, not only is it diversity of the studios they've acquired, but like the studios that they've acquired have diversity within themselves as well in terms of the games that they're going to make. So which I think, if you look at Sony, is something that Sony really lacks in terms of the games that they're making. Like, you think about the most popular games in Sony's lineup right now, they're mostly, I would say 80% of them are third-person action games. Like, there's not a ton of diversity in the kinds of games that are being made. I don't think that takes away from the merit of the greatness of those games. It's just, I look at what Xbox has in the pipeline, and I'm a little bit more excited about that, because it's just like, there's going to be tons of options.
There's also a diversity in the size of the scale and size of these games and studios. You got 343, and you have the Initiative, Quad A, whatever the hell that is.
The most marketing speak shit ever.
I know. And then you have smaller studios like Double Fine, which has historically created smaller scale games, more kind of old school games. I am excited about the diversity, although I find it sometimes hard to get excited about the games themselves just based on the pedigree of the studios, and that's a personal thing. A lot of these studios have created games that I didn't really enjoy or haven't been super jazzed about, but I know a lot of people do. And a lot of these studios are like somewhere either on the indie side or in the middle, which is interesting. And that's a great place to be. I think it is notable that like Ninja Theory has multiple teams working, so it does, and they indicated that when people responded, like, we were expecting something single player and narrative driven. They are working on something related to that too. But that speaks to, again, as you said, Luke, the diversity of the portfolio that these studios have, and the diversity of the portfolio Xbox has kind of collected. What I'm actually most excited about is, for a lot of these studios, now being under the Microsoft umbrella takes a lot of the pressure off. Like, especially for Double Fine, a studio that I am a huge fan of, they've constantly struggled with worrying about selling enough copies, constantly worrying about if the funding they have will drop out, if they'll be able to make it to the finish line with their games. And Microsoft swooping in to scoop them up kind of takes a lot of that pressure off. They know who Double Fine are, obviously. They know the kind of games Double Fine makes, and they were comfortable enough with that to go ahead and acquire them. So that speaks to their confidence in Double Fine as a studio.
Yeah.
There's also a strategy alignment, I think, in like viewing what Netflix has to do in order to maintain interest in their subscription service. It's all about like what content's coming up next. Okay, I'm done binge watching Mindhunter. Like, okay, but The Witcher's coming here, and
it's about volume.
You know, like it's about what's coming next. And with Xbox Game Pass, I think they understand, like, and he talks about it in this article as well, like how it kind of rocked the world when they announced that Sea of Thieves was going to be day and date on Xbox Game Pass, and rocked it even more when they said this is going to be standard for us moving forward. But in order to continue with that momentum and to maintain it, you have to say, like, oh, well, yeah, we know you just got done playing Bleeding Edge, but here's Double Fine's next game, you know, like, and then here's, you know, whoever else's next game. So I think there's a strategy thing to it that is really important for them.
So I'm with you on the thing that's most exciting to me is the diversity, just different size studios, different histories, vastly different games across the board here. And I've said many times that I've been just so disappointed this console generation with what Microsoft had to offer as far as first party exclusives. And I feel like I've missed out on a lot of great gaming because I chose to go the Xbox route. And if this wasn't something they were going to demonstrate that they were improving, like I was probably just going to go PlayStation next generation. But this laying all this out, I'm just so optimistic about the games that are going to be available in the future, and I'm inclined to just stick around for whatever Xbox is going to do.
I will point out that when Larry says he feels like he missed out on a lot of great gaming. He just means putting 150 hours into Until Dawn. That's all he means.
Oh no, dude. Last of Us, Horizon Zero Dawn, Until Dawn, sure.
God of War.
God of War, yes. And that was a series I was never interested in, but this most recent take on it was just so different. But one thing that really interests me is a couple of these studios have a history that includes some RPG games. And I feel like I've not gotten into a really good RPG in a long time. There were some options on PlayStation this generation, but really there weren't on Xbox, except for the 3 times I bought Skyrim. And each time I bought Skyrim, it was just a really similar experience to the last time I bought Skyrim. So I don't really want to buy Skyrim again, but I'll try.
Truth.
Don't worry,
I didn't get a
Bethesda
chance
will,
to try the fridge one, but
Bethesda will give you more opportunities to buy Skyrim. Don't you worry.
So that I'm kind of hoping I'll see something in that vein at EXO. But more than that, I want something in the horror genre. That's another area where the PlayStation really shined this generation, and Xbox had nothing. So that's what I'm hoping to see. So something I kind of want to point out is I think that you're absolutely right, Luke, that they're about to play the Netflix volume game of making sure that they have plenty to offer on Games Pass. And they've got to do that to keep that going. But I also shared an article in our Discord earlier today where there was conversation about wanting to see Games Pass happen on other platforms. So we know that that's something that's on the radar for Xbox, even if it's not a near future thing. We know that xCloud is something that they're actively working toward. And so I guess my question is the vision of extending those services onto other platforms at odds with the idea of first party exclusives?
I think Greenberg was very, very careful to say that they are working on games for their platforms, not for their consoles, but for their platforms, to say that, hey, you may be able to play this game on your phone or maybe even on the Switch if Xbox Game Pass even comes there, but that would still be considered Xbox's platform. You know, like if you've got Spotify, you're not like, well, I'm listening to this on my Samsung. You're saying I'm listening to this on Spotify, you know? So I think he was very intentional about that verbiage. So yes, I don't think they're going to be like, hey, here's the little cartridge that tastes terrible. You can play Halo on your Nintendo Switch now. It's all going to be, you can play this on your Switch through Xbox Game Pass, which is available on there now.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I think it also kind of indicates, like you were saying, Luke, what their idea of Xbox is. I think their idea of Xbox is to, at a risk of sounding like Jaden Smith, Xbox is everything.
How can Xbox be real when our eyes aren't real?
But I think they're thinking of, like you said, their platforms are anything that has Xbox Game Pass or Xbox Live on it. And I think that's diverging from what we've traditionally thought of as console exclusive or platform exclusive. But that seems to be the direction that this generation is going. And in fact, my worry is that they might be too far ahead of the curve, but it seems like they're being very cautious about this and being very careful about the way they talk about it.
Yeah. And so my worry with that is, are they pushing themselves out of the hardware space? Are we still at a place where first party exclusives are a big necessity to sell your hardware? And if I can play all of PlayStation's exclusives, I know we're far off from this, but if we get to a point where I can play all of PlayStation's exclusives and all of Xbox's exclusives from a PlayStation, how many people bother buying an Xbox?
I don't think we're ever going to see the day where Xbox makes Game Pass available on a platform that is equally as powerful as their Xbox hardware. I think that's the way you gate it, because there are always going to be people who want to play on hardware, like play locally hosted. I don't see Xbox Game Pass functioning similarly on like your phone or on the Switch, where you would download it directly and play it off of it, because that's just not how the system's built. There would have to be some sort of cloud computing that was in it. And so I think that's the way that you gate it, because even me, like the way I would primarily play those games would never be on Switch or on mobile. It would always be primarily on the hardware that they're natively made for, with those things like being supplemental to the experience. But it's the ultimate way to take advantage of like we want everything on Switch kind of deal, though. Because if you can say, look at this giant ass library we have that you can play via cloud on your Switch, just a huge win right there.
All right. Well, that's all I've got, but I encourage the viewers to go through and look at that article on Twinfinite, that interview with Aaron Greenberg, because there was a lot of information there, and I am really excited to see XO this year. I'm excited to see what's coming in the spring. And it feels good, because it's been a long time since I had excitement in the arena of Microsoft game lineups.
Yeah, I actually have a quick question, because this is something I was thinking about for XO. When and where do you think we'll see whatever the initiative is working on? That's my biggest question mark about Microsoft, because it seems they've put a lot of stock in this. They've called it like a Naughty Dog style, whatever kind of game they're making, narrative, AAA, blockbuster kind of game. When and where do you think we'll see that?
With the scale that they're talking, and just still how new that is, I'm not anticipating seeing that at XO. I think that's an E3 next year kind of thing.
I 100% think it's an E3.
I think it's either an E3 or whatever event they reveal the next Xbox at.
You cut out for me. I didn't hear that. Sorry.
Oh, I said it'll either be an E3 thing or whatever event they reveal the. Did I cut out again? I keep cutting out. All right, I'll type it in the chat for you guys. It's either going to be E3 or whatever event they reveal the next Xbox at. So, which won't be at E3, because they didn't reveal the Xbox One at E3, did they? They revealed it before and then gave more details, I think. So, and I think that's the model they'll continue to follow. So it'll be at one of those. It won't be at XO, because they're going to want to show that on the most high end. And to be able to couple that reveal with the messaging of like, look what the next Xbox is capable of. They're gonna want to bank on that.
And we're launching a console with an actual lineup of games.
Yeah, we've just heard so little about it. That's the most interesting thing to me.
What if they're just working on Rise 2?
I would fucking throw my computer out the window.
You heard it here first, folks. Rise 2, big announcement at E3.
I'm just like, it's been so long since we've seen a new IP from Microsoft, like a quality new IP
that made it to market.
That made it to market. There are a lot of caveats to that.
Scalebound looked awesome. Which that wasn't Xbox owned, it was just Xbox exclusive.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just very interested by that. So I didn't get to mention that before, but that's one of the most intriguing, still big question marks to me about Microsoft.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I could honestly see him holding off for another year. It's not going to release in the first year of the next Xbox. The first year is going to be Halo. Yep. All Halo. Yeah,
it's all going to be Halo.
And that may be to the detriment of the release, but it's going to all be Halo. So they may not even want to distract from that with whatever the initiative's working on.
I could see that launching the next year.
All right. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about Telltale, guys. You guys remember them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're being brought back from the dead in name alone, pretty much.
There's a metaphor here.
So yeah, Telltale Games is coming back. I'm just going to read a little bit of this from Jason Schreier. over on Kotaku. It says Telltale Games is back. Well, at least the name is. A group of investors announced plans today to revive the iconic studio, which shut down last September. Although with the company's staff having scattered to the winds, this seems like seems less like a revival and more like one of Clementine's enemies. A zombie. A walker, sorry.
A walker.
Today, Jamie O'Tilley and Brian Waddle, two men who did not work at Telltale Games, told press that they had secured the rights to the company's names and some of its licenses, and they will be reviving the company in Malibu, California, which is 400 miles away from where it was originally located. So this is a weird story, in my opinion, and I'm interested to get you guys' thoughts on it as well. I believe the licenses that they've retained, at least that I could find, they're going to still have license to Batman and to The Wolf Among Us they've retained, but I think pretty much everything else is lost, and they're going to be re-releasing some of the games that have been since removed from digital storefronts. But when you guys first saw this story, what were your thoughts? And then what have your thoughts become as the day has gone on? Have they evolved at all?
It was shocking to me. I was like, is that still an option? It's been a while. And then once I read the story and found out that it was essentially a name alone, I was like, okay, that makes more sense. And all I can think is that these two guys must have really enjoyed what Telltale was doing, or that's the style of game they want to make, and so they're just trying to capitalize on the name. Because they're essentially going to have to start from scratch, and whatever they do moving forward, it's going to have to be different in some ways from what Telltale was doing, because obviously that model wasn't working, and we've talked about that a bit on this show. I think either this or our old show.
Yeah, my immediate reaction to it was, huh. And then my reaction upon reading more about how Telltale employees could be involved, the philosophy of these two guys and why they've done this and what they aim to do to remedy it. My reaction was,
For the audio listeners, there was a dissatisfied face.
I think it's more complicated than that. There's a lot to this that I really find distasteful is not the right word, but there's a lot to this that I find kind of disconcerting. And then there's some elements to it that I do find could pay off for, I think, for gamers at least, if not the developers that have worked on previous Telltale properties. So I'm certainly now much more kind of distressed by the news on kind of like a philosophical basis, but I think there's some merits to it as well.
Yeah. My initial reaction was, Telltale, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. Like, I was around the same lines as you, Larry, of like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Everything's scattered to the wind. Like, what is there to save, to salvage? Let me read the background of these guys, and we can join Cody's perplexed. So O'Tilley's background, this is from Schreier's article, is in mobile license development. Powerhouse mobile games like Duck Dynasty and Power Rangers. While Waddle worked at the
licensed games, by the way.
Yeah. While Waddle worked at the outsourcing company Virtuos and the physics software maker Havoc. So, while Waddle seems to have some development background, is O'Tilley's in development, or is it in the brokering of the licensing deals for those mobile games? Like, I don't know. It seems opportunistic, but in the least opportunistic way. Like, they bought a shell. I imagine they did not pay much for this name for the remaining licenses, and so maybe in that sense, they struck while the iron was the hottest, because I imagine buying Telltale as things were going under would have been insanely expensive. But it seems to just be like they sat back and were like, oh, Telltale's known for making licensed products. We have experience with licensed products. Like, let's swoop in and take advantage of this. But then you read more about it and the structure of it, and it really seems like you're buying KFC, but not getting the secret recipe, the Colonel's secret recipe, you know? And it's just like, what is Telltale without the people that made the games? And so, but I did want to point out one other thing. Polygon spoke to Otilli, who told them, quote, that some workers from the original Telltale games will be offered freelance roles with full-time positions possible in the future, end quote. And just from a PR perspective, the optics of that look fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we just bought the name of this company that you gave your blood, sweat, and tears to for years. If you want to come back and work on a freelance basis, we might think about giving you a full-time job if things start to work out for us. Like, it just seems shitty.
It would look even worse if there'd been a recent like string of stories of companies like not treating workers well in the games industry.
Yeah, especially freelance workers, contract workers.
It's just also in all of those stories that Larry's saying we haven't seen. A large aspect of them is that there's a culture of trying to profit off of people's work based on how passionate they are about their work.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this is. It's them saying, we know you guys love these properties and we know you love working at Telltale. Come back and try to relive those glory days, even though you're only going to get paid on a freelance basis, even though you're probably going to work full-time hours. Come on back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of disgusting. It's that kind of, it's a revivified corpse with some still shell of humanity left in it.
Yeah. In the Discord, Circle Hunter said Cody's reaction was like, and posted the Buzz Lightyear.
Yeah,
I'm gonna join you, Cody.
Oh, there we go.
Is that a pipe?
Yes.
Gotta have it when I'm perplexed.
For our audio listeners, it's not a tobacco pipe. It is a crack pipe.
When we attended Johnson Bible College, I used to walk around in the halls wearing this pipe hanging out of my mouth. And one of the RAs came to me and was like, you can't have that. It's tobacco paraphernalia.
And you were like, correction, it is crack paraphernalia.
I was like, I'm super asthmatic. I'd literally die if I smoked it for real. But he still wouldn't let me use it.
Yeah, I don't know. There's not a ton to say about this story, I don't think. Just on the surface, it's a shitty move that most people aren't going to go beyond the headline of just Telltale is back to look into what this is. They're going to just assume that all of the properties and games that they loved are coming back. And other people were like, well, I'm not going to get back into Telltale until I see that they're going to have a new engine. I'm like, it's going to be a new fucking everything from them. Like, it is, they bought the name. They bought the right to the name and a couple of the licenses that they have. Like, I don't think there's very much else that's coming with this. But I do want to talk about people's just weird attachments to brands in games. And we've had this discussion a little bit on this show. More in talking about just like brand apologists. But Jason Schreier sent out this tweet at the time of this news break. He said, quote, lots of excitement this morning over headlines saying that Telltale Games is back, but the reality is that some people who didn't actually work at Telltale Games have bought the rights to a name. Brands don't make video games, end quote. And I just think that that's a super important point for us to remember. Like,
super important.
A super important point for us to remember. And it's the same thing that happens when we start thinking about, like, I think about BioWare now, you know, and where we are with BioWare today, post Anthem, post Mass Effect Andromeda, and people want to compare whatever we're going to get next from BioWare to what we got from BioWare a decade ago at this point. And it's like, BioWare doesn't make the games. the people at BioWare make these games. And the same thing is happening here with Telltale. And like, gaming is just strange in this attachment that we have to brands and not the recognition of the people behind the games.
Yeah, it's 100%. I think we've talked either around or at this point, like you said, for a while. And I think it's a problem in pop culture writ large, especially, and this we can loop in the conversation and the hubbub that happened around Spider-Man, Sony, and Marvel and Disney this past week, because this is sort of similar. There is an inherent, not inherent, but there's a power that brands hold over the people who are in their sway, and it's convincing you that a corporation has a personality and a face, and that the products under them have a personality and the face. That's what a brand is. It's about giving life to something that is amorphous.
Mm-hmm.
But those things aren't just created by like, especially with games, there's been a perception that these things are just like created by elves in a workshop. They tinker away and then they release these games out into the wild. We can enjoy them. But as we've learned, there are real people who suffer real mental, physical, psychological costs making these games. And we often don't recognize that to our and their detriment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, exactly as you said, and as Jason Schreier said, like a studio is only as good as the people under it, and a brand is only as powerful as the games that are made by those people. And so when all you have is the shambling corpse of that studio without anything inside of it, it kind of loses its power, but it still maintains kind of like the outward appearance of it. And so people are still drawn to it. It's an odd dynamic, and it does show the power of brands. Just like everybody was quick to jump to Disney's defense, despite the fact that Disney is a fucking monopoly at this point in an industry. It's the largest film studio that has ever been around in history. People are jumping to its defense like it needs it.
Guilty.
Sorry, this has been nagging at me all week. And
No,
we don't
Luke
do a movie
called me.
podcast. We don't do a movie podcast, so I just wanted to address it in a roundabout way.
Luke called me and was like, this is like Disney's fault, right? I'm like, yeah, but Sony ruined other Spider-Man movies. And I want to be.
Yeah. It's just public negotiation between two massive corporations. But
and we're taught from a very early age, like, not just in games, but like, Larry, you're a fan of WVU football, right?
Yeah. I mean, not super, but if I'm going to watch football, that's what it's going to be.
But you're a fan, and I'm a sports fan as well. Cody, you're not as much into sports, right? But every 4 years at WVU, it's a whole new set of players, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't fucking matter because they've got that logo on the side of their helmet, and you're going to tune in and you're going to root for them to win the same way I do for Florida State every single year. Every 4 years, it's different people. Take my favorite basketball team, remove every player that plays on it, put them on another team, and just ship in new people. I'm still just going to root for the jersey. Like, we're programmed this way from a very early age that, like, it's just easier for us to attach ourselves to this overarching idea than the people that are underneath it. And I don't know. I think we need to realize that about ourselves.
Even the current state of politics for a lot of people, it's which symbol am I behind? I don't have time to understand and think through the nuances of every issue. Let me just pick a team.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the power of brands and the power of marketing. I think it's what's different about games to me, and I've been thinking about this a lot. There was a very interesting book that I read while I was in my anthropology program about the culture of brands and brands as cultural symbols. And for games, I sort of see a lot of this, but enhanced, because not only is it in our houses, like TV, like television shows and movies, but we are actors in it. We tell ourselves that we're actors in it, and we're actors in it for extended periods of time, like for some people hundreds of hours. And that amount of engagement with something like WoW, where you've played it for 10 years, you have memories, distinct memories attached with that. and those get attached not just to the game, but to the Blizzard logo that you see every time you've launched that game in your browser for 10 years. Games just have there's such a intimate attachment we have with it that I think it enhances a lot of the stuff that is felt by Marvel fanboys, Sony fanboys, the few that there are. Whatever. I just think games are such a powerful tool, and sometimes that might be to our detriment to understanding the work that goes into them.
Mm-hmm. And then the final thing I just want to mention here, getting back to the Telltale thing, like, I'm curious as to the quality of these games when they start to roll out and the strategy behind these games as they start to roll out. I don't have tremendous confidence in either of those things. So, and I don't think there's much we can do outside of just speculating on it because we don't know these individuals that are taking over. But I don't see too many former Telltale employees clamoring to jump back onto that ship following the way that things ended, especially on a freelance capacity.
It seems that some people have already been contacted and have expressed interest based on tweets from some Telltale employees I saw. But yeah, I'm also kind of worried about, because a large part of the problem with Telltale was mismanagement and like poorly managed scheduling, poorly managed deadlines, and for perhaps one of these people who doesn't really have a lot of experience in development, I'm worried that those same mistakes will be repeated despite the fact that they say they will try not to. Also, the fact that they indicated that they're not trying, they really like the binge watching model worries me, because I think a large part of the reason Telltale didn't release everything at the same time and release it episodically was to alleviate the kind of the crunch that would happen despite it happening anyway, but we'll see.
All right, well, let's move on. Cody, what is your topic?
Yeah. So I think this is probably the biggest story of the past, I guess, couple of days. But towards the beginning of this week, this seems like it was so long ago, a developer by the name of Natalie Lawhead came out and recounted her story of being sexually assaulted by Jeremy Soule, who is a very notable figure in the game development community. He's a composer. He's composed for, I believe, Knights of the Old Republic. He's composed for a bunch of the Elder Scrolls games. And there have been stories like this in the past, not just about Jeremy, but about other men in the games industry. And sometimes they'll be recognized by kind of the bubble of people who are socially conscious within the industry or the media. And oftentimes in the past, we've seen those accounts just kind of get swept under the rug, either by the people in power, or just it gets lost in the shuffle of the news cycle. That did not happen this time around. And in fact, after Natalie's account, several developers, one other developer came out and accused and kind of corroborated her account by mentioning another story of her assault at the hands of Jeremy Soule. And then a number of developers opened up about their stories, making allegations of assault and abuse at the hands of many men in the industry. And they named them. They put their names front and center, and they told their stories. And so I want to talk about this, I guess, writ large, because this has the capacity to be the equivalent of gaming's Me Too moment. And while I think that's a potentially very powerful and I think a very impactful thing, and it's something I think needs to happen in this industry, I also have questions about whether it can happen in this industry. So I think I probably know where you guys come down on this stuff, but let's, I guess, just kind of talk about what were your immediate reactions to this stuff. We've seen this happen in Hollywood, and we've seen accounts like this in the past in the games industry, but I think the volume and microscope lent to this by not only people telling their stories and people then telling stories based off those stories, but the media, which has had a tendency in the past to ignore this stuff, I think it's impossible to ignore. So what were your reactions, I guess, just immediately?
So, I don't know if this is splitting hairs or not, but I don't know if I'd call it like gaming's Me Too movement, just because I think it's just an extension of the whole wave of the. I think obviously the Me Too movement that started with the Weinstein stuff has gotten us to a point where these women were more comfortable sharing their story and felt like people might react, whereas in the past maybe it would have been lost in the shuffle. And I say that as someone, like, I saw a lot of people I knew personally who have shared their stories as this has been the case. I mean, initial reactions, it's always terrible when these stories surface. So yeah, I think I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything earth-shattering that I'll say here. It is no shock that these stories exist, but it is shocking when you hear these stories. And it's not just games, and it's not just entertainment. I mean, this is any competitive industry where people have a position of power and they take advantage of those positions of power and leverage it for their own self-satisfaction and their own I mean, just disgusting nature. So yeah, it's always heartbreaking to see these stories, and but it's also encouraging to see people empowered to speak out as well, and that we now have a culture that we're now moving towards a culture of people who listen to these stories as well, and that we don't just turn a deaf ear to them.
Yeah, I don't think I can see anything that you guys haven't said or that people haven't said before. This stuff is far too common, and I hope that as these stories continue to come out, first of all, I hope that we've already sort of seen a chain reaction. People have been empowered to speak out, and that's great. It takes incredible bravery and strength to come out and name your abuser, and tell your story. And I think we should always be receptive to that. And I hope that as people become more empowered, I do hope that there is change in the industry. It's hard to say when we exist outside of it, and there's such a culture of this kind of thing. As you said, in any competitive industry or really any workplace environment, there's a potential for this to happen. But I hope these stories don't lose their ability to shock us. I hope they continue to affect us. I hope they don't continue to happen, but I do hope that when people do come and tell their story, we aren't numb to it. Because that's the worst thing that I think we can be. I think us not talking about it and not saying anything is just as detrimental as the act itself happening. And so I want to talk about, I guess, the cycle that has happened with this and happens with any event like this, but perhaps is magnified by things that are unique to this industry and unique to the culture within gaming. I think there is always a wave of support that comes with people telling their stories. At the same time, there is a wave of people questioning those stories. And this was no different. Talking about brands, we saw people who were either associated and connected with the people who were the center of these accusations and allegations, and just fans of games in general coming to question these women's accounts based on a connection to, or I guess a total disbelief. Like, I couldn't believe that someone who has been involved in the creation of a game that I love could do this, despite the fact that you clearly do not know the person. So I want to talk about this response, because I think that happened, that sort of questioning of a victim's account happened and continues to happen, unfortunately. But I wonder if there are things within games as a culture that kind of magnify that response. I'm talking about things like already there being a culture of sexism and a carryover from Gamergate. I'm talking about the powerful connection we were just talking about between gamers and the properties that they consume. Do you guys feel like that kind of community backlash, for lack of a better word, is similar to what we've seen, or kind of magnified by some things that are kind of, I guess, endemic to the culture? It might be hard to say too, because a lot of that stuff goes hand in hand.
I'm going to say I don't think it's particularly different from the typical response. And the nature of my work is that I've had to be involved with a lot of these situations. And the pretty standard reaction is, nah, he wouldn't do that. He's too good a guy. But also, I think there's a fine line to walk here. And I think we're not currently in a great place walking it, as far as listening to the stories and encouraging proper steps to be taken for investigations to happen and that sort of thing, without devolving into an angry mob.
Yeah.
So, like, I think rushing to the guy's defense is definitely not the right call. I laugh when I'm uncomfortable, and that's a bad habit, especially in this conversation. Sorry about that. This is not funny. But also, you know, the vast majority of claims are true, but there are a small percentage that aren't. And I think sometimes we as the public need to recognize that and listen and encourage and do whatever we can to support the person pursuing the proper channels for justice. But I think about Aziz Ansari.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like his story was unfairly lumped in with Weinstein. And even the woman's own account in that case was, it was just a really uncomfortable date that went badly. And a news article ran that woman's words and presented headlines that put him in the boat of somebody that built a career on manipulating and abusing women. And the immediate reaction of canceling Aziz Ansari was action. And so I think there's a fine line to walk there. But to the main question of, is the disbelief worse in gaming culture? I just really don't think it is in the situations that I've personally been involved in. Just people don't want to believe that someone that they like, or that someone that has produced something they like, could be capable of something like this. And it, you know, when I support a victim in pursuing the proper channels of investigation and that sort of thing, reporting, I try to get people to understand that it's not that I think that sorry, I'm trying to think of how to word this. I think that this thing is just far more common. It's not that I think that there are a handful of people that are just really bad. I guess I just have a real view of human, which is not great. I said that very poorly after all. But wherever there is power and influence to be accrued is what I'm getting at. There is the potential to abuse that power and that influence. And whether it's an organization, whatever it is, has a built-in system of accountability, of checks. And if there's not, like, somebody sooner or later is going to abuse that position. And the types of people this is the better way of saying it, the types of people that will abuse that power will be drawn to those positions. And if you don't have that accountability in place, it's only a matter of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it necessarily gets magnified in gaming, in gaming culture. I think we saw this happening in the entertainment culture when, you know, names were being brought up there as well. And I agree, like, Larry and I both had personal encounters with situations like this, being in when I was in ministry, Larry currently being in ministry. Like, we're mandatory reporters when these kinds of things come up, when we're talking with youth. And so we have had our fair share of conversations and had to hear our fair share of skepticism that comes as a result of it. But the difference being those were coming from people who did have personal knowledge of these individuals. It doesn't make it right that they had that skepticism, but I think it magnifies how shitty it is of people who don't know these individuals to come and accuse one of being a liar and to come to the defense of another who they don't know just because he made some cool music in Skyrim. Like, I agree with Larry that we often ignite into a mob before we ever have a chance to see a full picture of anything, and I think that is wrong. And I think that the number of times that we do that and then have to recant or put in a position where we would need to recant on the reaction that we have goes a long way in undermining the actual goals of these kinds of movements, you know? And so these really like toxic and explosive reactions in either direction, I feel we need to be more measured when we're approached with these stories, and listen and pursue and investigate and don't dismiss. And that's the issue that I take with so many of these reactions, is just how dismissive they are. And that's the reason that this culture perpetuates. Roy Speedrun, sorry, he's been talking about talking a lot in the chat, but one of the things he says is, are these things excusable? Absolutely not. But right now there isn't a conversation. There's only pointing fingers, and I think the reason that we can't move beyond this culture is because it's met with so much dismission that it's either it's the reason that we can hear our president talk about grabbing women by the pussy and the defense is it's just locker room talk.
Or brag for years about walking into women's dressing rooms, and then when women accuse them of that, well, they're lying.
Yeah. And it's when we are dismissive that nothing changes. And that dismissiveness exists in gaming and entertainment and in the personal situations that we've come across as well. So
it's not just dismissing it. There's also I think a lack of recognition, while similar to dismissing it, is just as harmful when media outlets don't cover something or take the time to cover something, I should say. Because to your point, there's a reason you didn't see stories published on Polygon, Kotaku, The Verge about this the moment it happened. It's because they were taking the time to sort through the accounts, to fact check stuff, to double check that there were corroborations to these accounts before writing a single word on a page. And that is important. I think the vast majority of these accounts are real. I think most people recognize that. It's cases like the Aziz Ansari case that you mentioned that unfortunately put a question mark in people's heads and caused them to doubt it. But the vast majority of these do have veracity to them. And so it is important for not only reporters, but everybody to understand that. Take the time to understand it. Listen, as you said, Larry, listening is super important here. And don't just jump to a conclusion either way, although I do think it's important to accept those stories and, I guess, try to understand them as much as you possibly can, even if you haven't gone through something like that. Err on the side of caution and believing them. Wait as things kind of develop and kind of form an opinion from there. But I think it's always best to side with the victim, even if it may be. I think it's always important to side with the victim in cases like this, and especially in cases like this where you can see the text chains, you can see abusers trying to victimize themselves, and in the process re-victimizing the person that they've hurt either emotionally or physically. And that's some of the most disgusting stuff that I saw here, and stuff you see over and over again.
Yeah.
You see the person who is being accused of these actions taking the victim's words and twisting them to make themselves seem like the victim, which is absolutely disgusting to me. But that's a part of the conversation. We do need to talk about this stuff. We need to recognize it And I think I hope this outburst of allegations and accusations is a first step for this industry to start recognizing something that's been a problem for a long time in culture at large and in this culture in particular.
One of the things that I'm trying to remember the name of the person who a lot of these stories were coming out about, and I apologize. He's a games writer in the UK that stories were coming out about. And something that I appreciated about the chain of stories was that the goal of sharing these stories was clearly stated. And I think there is a therapeutic and catharsis to sharing these stories, but I also think there should be the immediacy of being able to share these stories on social media. There needs to be a purpose in doing it. And Counselor in Session is in the chat. Welcome. Well, the thing I appreciated about this chain of stories, and I apologize, I can't remember the guy's name these stories were about, but was this guy was like a sought after mentor in the games writing space. And the reason that these women were sharing these stories was because it was like, we need people, we recognize that this guy doesn't work for an organization that he's being held accountable to. The position of power that he is in is due to his expertise and his experience in this. And he uses that to go out and to seek out women to mentor in this space. And we want other people to be aware of that. Other people who share the aspirations and the goals to be aware of that. And there's an educational nature to it, as clinical as that may sound, like that we want you to be aware that this monster does these things to these individuals, because we recognize there are people in positions that may want to be under his tutelage, but this is how he is going to leverage that. And I have a deep respect for all of these women who are willing to put their careers on the line, their reputations on the line, and to be brave enough to face the toxic and awful backlash that comes as a result of these stories, to say enough is enough, and we don't want you to do this to other women.
Definitely. I think. Sorry, go ahead, Larry.
If you're about to move on, I do want to wait. Because I've been saying, like, we got to be careful not to turn into an angry mob, but I also just want to say that I understand why we have over the last couple of years done that so often, and it's because justice has been withheld. Things have happened very publicly and been let go. Like Epstein is probably the biggest example. Like if metoo hadn't happened, I don't think Epstein would have ever, like, he'd still be doing what he was doing, I think. And it was something that everybody in his circle knew about, and it was just a wink and a nod, and oh, that's terrible, we got to keep moving. And when justice is withheld, there's eventually going to be an explosion toward that injustice. And so I understand it. I just I think we want to be careful not to be destructive as we are correcting things. And again, just to drive the point in again, the Aziz Ansari thing, just where I'm at geographically, the nature of the culture here, there are a lot of people who don't want to look at these things, and they don't want to view the Me Too movement. And all it takes is one of those stories. Like after that story happened, I've had to have a lot of like tough face-to-face conversations with people of, now you need to be taking these things seriously. And I get that there's this one case where things weren't quite right, but that doesn't discount the whole movement. And like I want justice, and sometimes the mob gets in the way of actual justice.
Yeah. I guess that is sort of a segue into what I did want to talk about, which is, I guess, what we hope and what steps we hope are taken from here. What can actually be done, similar to, I guess, what has been done in Hollywood to a certain extent. I think there's still a lot of work to be done, obviously. But what do you think can be done to move forward from this, what can continue to be done as we move through this process, not just on us as people who are here hearing the accounts and people who are just members of the community, but those who do hold power. Like I saw earlier today, one of the people who was accused was a member of the team from the Night in the Woods team.
Mm-hmm.
And their response to it was, I think, probably the best that we've seen so far. It's a small team, granted, so this stuff actually hits a lot harder, I think, for them because they all do know each other very intimately. And perhaps, I guess the size of some of these teams is what allows some of this stuff to happen. But they heard the stories. They came out and said, we believe the accounts of these women, multiple women who accused, I think his name was Alec. I want to say his name. I want to make sure to say his name. His name was Alec Halauka. Yeah, he worked for the team that worked on Night in the Woods, and Zoe Quinn was the one who posted her account. And so they came out in support of the accounts and the allegations. They took the time to think about it, and they parted ways with him. Unequivocally, they parted ways with him and recognized that after hearing not only Zoe's story, but stories from several other women that corroborated those stories, that this is probably the best action to take. They treated it with the gravity it deserved. It's clear that they thought about it. There's a whole chain on Twitter you can see that was written by, I guess, co-written by two of the people on the team who will now be taking over for Alec and taking on his responsibility. And it's clear that it's going to impact a lot of the work they do and a lot of, obviously, their personal relationships. But they took the time to listen, consider, and then take action. And so I think that is obviously ideal. That in an ideal world, that is normally, unfortunately, that's not always the case. They obviously took the time to investigate it themselves. But what kind of work do you think can be done either at studios, this small, studios larger, and with people like us who all we do is hear the stories and then perhaps move on with the rest of our day? What can we do as well?
Can you outline some of the things, and forgive my ignorance here, but like some of the systemic changes that were made in Hollywood as a result of the Me Too movement?
Repeat that, you cut out.
I was saying, could you outline like what were some of the systemic changes made in Hollywood as a result of the Me Too movement?
Well, there were individual studio efforts, obviously. So a lot of that had to do with how things are reported and treated once they're reported. As you were talking about, both of you guys, the kind of the mandatory reporting that is often not the norm, unfortunately. But also, I think the conversation opening up a culture of acceptance and listening. So on a broader philosophical level, I guess that is also what occurred. And that manifested itself in policies about kind of that focused on anonymity, as well as kind of recognizing stories, and it kind of fostered a culture within a lot of studios and within Hollywood at large about kind of these accounts. Although I will say there's clearly a lot of work that still needs to be done in Hollywood, and a lot of these stories still do go under the radar, and people are still hesitant to talk about it. So I don't think the Me Too movement has been like the landmark thing that a lot of people have called it, although I think it's a start. And I think this could be a start if actions are taken within the culture and within studios and the system in general. So I want to talk about kind of moving forward, what we do from here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, look, in any position where, in any company where there are levels of power and there is power to be leveraged, there needs to be people who are mandatory reporters in those organizations.
Accountability.
And whether that's HR or, department heads, whoever it has to be, like the rule is in ministry, like when we're working with kids in ministry, the rule is if a kid says anything that may suggest that they are going through physical, sexual abuse, we are required to report it to authorities. Like we don't report it to the head minister, or we don't report it to our elders. We don't report it to, the camp manager. You report it to the authorities. Like there's no chain of command,
And there's room for that organization to chain and I think that can be a good thing, but once you are confided in, the clock starts ticking. In 24 hours, the authorities better know, or you can be held personally, legally responsible for your failure to report.
Yeah, so I think
that's great.
Yeah, so I think that's huge. But I mean, and I know that we like to be a podcast of solutions. We don't like to just wallow in despair about some of these things that are going on. But like, I look at the Riot Games thing that happened a couple weeks ago, the culture of sexism and of sexual harassment that was going on there. They settled the case, and in their settlement also said, we have established that there is nothing systemic about our culture that caused this stuff to happen. And it's just like, fuck that. Like, if it got to the point where you guys had to sit with arbitrators across a table and sign documents about why somebody wasn't getting paid as much, or why somebody it felt uncomfortable due to the sexual nature of a conversation, like that is a systemic issue. I don't fucking care who you are. If it's reached that point, it's systemic. And I guess I do despair a little bit, because where so many of these large companies are tied up in corporations with shareholders and, who are so terrified of any kind of legal action being taken against their organization because of how it may impact their pockets. Like, I just worry that even if we establish levels of accountability, that those levels will break down. I mean, we see this even at the reporting level when we get to actual law enforcement authorities, and how much justice is not delved out, even when it reaches the people who have the highest authority to dish it out. So I don't know, but I do think a great place to start is establishing mandatory reporters, and just the transparency that is starting to come over the last few years of people just being willing to share these stories.
Yeah. Establishing a culture where conversation can actually happen is important as well. And that sounds like a highfalutin kind of thing, but it can be manifested in very practical ways.
Yeah. Connected to that, I know the idea of adding positions to companies is a little tricky. You got budgets to balance, that kind of thing. But even if it's not like someone that's there all the time when the organization is open, I think organizations would benefit from bringing something into their structure where there's somebody who shows up regularly, weekly, whatever, where people can go and talk, and a counseling type role. But if I'm having an issue, I know that I can go, like, this is the person that I go to and I talk to. And I think in most organizations, that path is not clearly laid out. And, churches have grappled with this issue, obviously. There's been a problem because, again, there's the opportunity for power and influence. And if that's not got some kind of checks on it, it's going to attract people that will abuse it. And so just looking at the lessons that churches have had to learn, people need training to recognize the signs that somebody's doing this type of thing. I think the broad public is real, just ignorant to what it looks like for a predator to groom a person and prepare them for abuse. And I've dealt with a disturbing number of people who were able to blame a victim, oftentimes an underage victim, as a willing participant in the abuse, because they were ignorant of what it looks like to be groomed. And so, like, there's got to be education within organizations, and I recognize that the feasibility of this and making it happen is a challenge, but I think There are challenges that need to be addressed. There needs to be a clear chain of, this is who I go to if I've got an issue. There needs to be education of what it looks like for someone to, like, what are the red flags of an abuser? And I think that's something that maybe doesn't, I think addressing it organizationally is important, but it's also something that we need to start addressing societally. Because the people that abuse they are the people who can present themselves as, no, not him. He'd never do that. Because they, like, the one of the two women featured in the article you shared talked about gaslighting. Like,
Yeah.
people are often manipulators, and they're great manipulators. That's what enables them to get away with the things that they do for so long. And then there are broad cultural changes, legal changes that a friend. And he told me recently that Tennessee is now a state where every adult is a mandatory reporter. So it's not just people in special roles. If a kid comes to you and says they've been abused, you've got to report it. And that may seem overboard, but if you're ever in a position where a person is telling you this is happening, it can be really hard to encourage them to pursue the avenues of investigation and dealing with the abuser. But it's really important where the abuser just goes unchecked to the next person. And then so last year, I don't know, there's a reporter, Elizabeth Brunig. She reports for the Washington Post. She wrote, it was a great piece of writing on a terrible topic about a rape that happened in Texas and was covered up. And I'd encourage everybody to go find that article, read it. When that happens, every cop that mishandles that situation should face severe legal repercussions. If the people tasked with upholding justice fail to do so, they've contributed to the injustice and need to be treated like criminals. So I probably launched in a lot more directions than you were asking, but
No, it's perfect.
This stuff is just so rampant and underreported, and I think, just from my work experience, I just think the statistics are lower than what is the actuality, because these are things people don't want to talk about and don't want to revisit, and I understand that from the victims, but I think the average person just does not realize how bad this problem is.
Yeah. And so I think it's important to continue to, like, for us, it's sometimes, I think it is easy to sometimes fall into despair, like you said, Luke. It's difficult for so many things in this country to seemingly be in a place where we're telling victims what they can do not to be abused, as opposed to focusing on what we can do to prevent abusers from actually abusing in the first place. That can be disheartening. But I think the more we do call attention to this stuff in the small ways that we can, the more we privilege these voices when they do come forward, the more we listen, the more we talk about it amongst ourselves, and don't stop talking about it, because there's going to be a temptation, I think, with this stuff. It's the way any news cycle works, unfortunately. Now it's a 24/7 hour news cycle, and we are quick to forget things, and things are quick to disappear under the rug. And I hope that this is not one of those things. I hope the reporters continue to talk about it and report on it. I hope we, as people, just lay people, continue to talk about it. And I think you're right to expand the scope, Larry, because this isn't just it's not something that inhabits this industry. It's not just something that inhabits Hollywood. It's a systemic and a cultural thing all across the country, because these systems are intertwined, and there are a lot of, as you said, wherever there is power, there's the potential to abuse it. And unfortunately, a lot of the people within these systems are able to hide behind those systems because those systems are interconnected as well. So I think it's valuable to think about it, not just in light of the games industry, but in light of how we can approach this stuff culturally at large.
And, you spoke of sometimes the failure to address, Luke, you spoke of how the failure to address sometimes stems from the, I don't want to affect the bottom dollar for the shareholders. And allow me to weaponize that for a moment. If you're in charge of an organization, understand that if you are not taking the precautions, you've opened yourself up to the risk that one day one of these things may happen, and it may affect your bottom line. So if nothing else will motivate you to start addressing it, let that start it. Like, we have all these, I think churches that are handling things well have all these safeguards in place and accountability and all that, and nothing can 100% prevent anything. We recognize that. But for a church, the reality is even that can destroy a church, whether it's true or not. And so we try to be on guard, and all organizations need to think that way. Like, if one of these things crops up, it's going to damage you for sure. So do everything in your power to make sure that these things can't happen. You can't stop it all, but do your best.
You can try.
Yeah. There was one last thing I wanted to touch on. The first woman mentioned in your article, I believe it was Zoe.
Yes.
She, in her notes that she shared on Twitter, she had like this sort of aside comment of she believes in rehabilitation, not punishment. And with this particular issue, like, I think that we would do well to start looking at it in that way. Because oftentimes abusers are people who've been abused themselves. Like, these things happen because something is messed up, and jail and the threat of jail isn't going to fix it. And so that's another systemic change that needs to happen of, for sure, there are cases that are where maybe the person's beyond the scope of rehabilitation and needs to be treated as such. But our first step should be to try to get these people to a place where they're healthy again. And you still take the precautions, and you never put them in a position again where they've got the power to do the same thing again. But I agree with her on that point, that rehabilitation is more effective for our society than just punishment.
And we could afford to think about a lot of things that way as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well. All right. Well, let's move on. I'm sure that we're going to continue to see things coming out of this, and I do think that we're going to see changes. I think we're already seeing changes, at least in the openness and transparency. So,
can I throw one last thing out there? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I know I've talked a lot. But as far as what we as consumers can do, I don't think jumping on an angry mob is the safe bet. But you sit, you listen, you read, you stay informed, and you stay aware of the follow-up of the stories, and hopefully the organizations will be held accountable as these stories crop up. But if no one, I'm not on the. I am also not a big fan of the whole cancel culture thing. But when we get these obvious, egregious examples where somebody's definitely done something wrong, the company is obviously just brushing it under the rug, then at that point, I think you as a consumer do step in. You say, all right, no more money to that organization. Because the sad reality is, for a lot of these organizations, that's the only language that they can hear.
Vote with your wallet.
Sorry.
No, you're good. All right. Well, let's move on, guys. And there's no good way to move on in a video game podcast from a topic as heavy as that one. So we're just gonna scoot. All right. Because I do want to end our show the way we end all of our shows, with everybody's favorite game. All right. Larry is exasperated because it's Two Truths and a Gaming Live, the musical, the series, gaming edition. I saw Disney tweeted about High School Musical, the musical, the series. And It was just even more ridiculous seeing it from a branded Twitter account come across my screen.
The idea behind that show?
No, I have not.
Like why it has that title?
No.
This is a good way to add some levity to this show. The show is about a group of high schoolers who decide to put on a presentation of High School Musical. And so not only are they performing songs from High School Musical, they're original songs for this musical performed outside of that musical.
How awesome is it that you create a show where half the material is already written for yourself?
So wait, my head hurts. Hold on. So it's a musical about
Doing a musical. Not putting on a musical. Not putting on a musical,
putting
Larry.
on the High School Musical.
Yeah, putting on the High School Musical.
It's a High School
Snake
Musical.
eating its tail. This is officially the snake eating its tail.
Speaking of snakes eating themselves, let's move to this. Let's move to the
dude. It's fucked up.
Let's move to the scoreboard. The way this game works is I have a game, very rare. Most people probably haven't heard of it. I will tell you 2 truths and a lie about this. These two one esteemed expert and Larry must
Not even
determine
an esteemed expert.
Just believe everything I'm told.
must determine which one is the lie. Moving to the scoreboard, Cody has the opportunity to take the very first lead. I think you've got like 6 unanswered points so far, bringing the score to 8-8. So you can take the lead today. And Larry, hold on, we got to run it through.
Yeah, well, we have to.
Well, no, I built some special software to run this through. So let me do that real quick. And enter 0 points, no points.
Can you crunch the numbers again?
Yep. Yeah, 0. Like a snake eating its own tail. All right, my game today. It's not a game. It is a franchise. And that franchise is Madden. All right? So I've decided we've gone with.
Just give yourself a point.
Hold on. We've gone with okay, Cody knows a lot about this game to try to get Larry a point. We've gone with Larry knows a lot about this game to try to get Larry a point. Now we're going to go with neither of you know anything about these games. So we're going to try to get Larry a point. My goal is to get Larry on the board. All right? As you know, Madden, officially licensed NFL simulation game. Here are our facts. First, over the years, the NFL has forced EA to remove a number of features from the game that they deem to be harmful to the league's image. These have included things such as an ambulance that ran over players on their way to pick up other injured players, any mention of concussions from injury reports and in-game commentary, and dynamic audience attendance, which caused crowd sizes to dwindle if a team performed poorly. Number 2. People think that the Madden curse started when EA started to put athletes on the cover of Madden, but the curse actually began the first year Madden released. That year, John Madden was featured on the cover of the game and suffered from a heart attack during a cross-country flight. Number 3. John Madden was actually the 3rd choice to be the face of the game. Series founder Trip Hawkins originally wanted Joe Montana to be the face of the franchise, but he already had an exclusive deal with Atari, and the 2nd choice was UC Berkeley coach Joe Kapp, who refused unless he was given royalties to the game. All right, so we've got the NFL removing features, the Madden curse, and Madden being the 3rd choice. Larry, let's start with you. Which one do you think is the lie?
B, heart attack, final answer.
All right. Codsworth, what is your answer?
What was the? So can you go over the 3rd one?
John Madden was actually the 3rd choice to be the face of the game. Series founder Trip Hawkins originally wanted Joe Montana to be the face of the franchise, but he already had an exclusive deal with Atari. And UC Berkeley coach Joe Kapp was the 2nd choice, but he refused unless he was given royalties.
It's going to be unexciting, but I think I'll go with the heart attack one too.
Well. It appears that you guys both have a point here. That one is the lie. Larry is on the board, but Cody is 1 point away from winning the game. It's 1st to 10. Go ahead,
Doesn't
Larry.
matter.
17 rounds in. Finally have a point.
Did you?
Isn't he not dead?
No, John Madden's still alive.
He's dead. Yeah, he's alive, right? Okay.
Yeah, you can suffer from a heart attack and be alive.
Sorry, I thought that's what you were saying. I thought you said he suffered and died. No.
Oh, I just said he suffered from a heart attack.
Okay.
Was that why
Got
you
it.
answered it with such confidence, Larry?
No, I just figured he wasn't on the cover the first year.
Oh no, he was on the cover the first year. The reason that lie was definitely unbelievable is because John Madden doesn't fly. He is afraid to fly. He takes a bus everywhere. Yeah.
Why?
He's terrified of flying, so it's like his thing. He has the Madden bus that he drives around in. So or gets chauffeured around in. All right, so the score is Cody 9, I have 8, and Larry is on the board with 1. So he is the real winner today. All right, guys, let's get out of here. Let's go around the circle. Who are you? Where can we find you? What are you going to be tweeting about this week? Larry.
I'm Larry. You can find me on Twitter at StillInFlux, and I'll definitely be tweeting about the Man of Medan.
All right, Coddington.
My name is Cody. You can find me on Twitter at ProElectioneer. I'm not even going to acknowledge that. And I probably won't be tweeting too much because I will be too busy playing Control and absorbing all of its good weirdness. One thing I didn't mention is that in all the ways this game is weird and good, I think Death Stranding will be weird and bad.
Shoot Some Ladders by Hideo Kojima.
Yeah.
All right, my name is Luke Croft. You can find me on Twitter at LukePVA. College football's back this week, guys, so I'm probably just going to be tweeting about that. So this has been PvA Radio. We do this every single week over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is the show where each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week to the table. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article or your CAFA, if you will. And Cody, what do we want people to do with that?
First, you take a trip to the astral plane, and you shout "Kaffa" into the void and hope the void answers back. And also spam that emote in the chat. That
is correct. If you can't catch us live, you can catch us on youtube.com/PvA Radio the very next day, where we break it out topic by topic, or you can listen to the whole show in its entirety, or you can find us on podcast services everywhere. Wherever you're listening, we greatly appreciate it. Tune in tomorrow night for the PvA Nightly Rundown. I am going to be back refreshed and better than ever going into a 4-day weekend, boys and girls. So excited. All right. 4 days. So until next time, we love you and goodbye.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Would you like me to pick up that shortwave radio?